Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Flying Lap podcast. I'm Chester.
I'm Thomas.
This time, a little switch up on the format, and this episode is going to be all English because we have a special guest today. And joining us is Dr. Aaron Melvin, former head of aero at Haas F1, senior aerodynamicist at Mercedes and Honda, and most importantly, the championship-winning Brawn GP team in 2009. Welcome, Aaron.
Hi.
Wow, this is such a
quite a generous introduction.
Yeah, and welcome. Can we call you Aaron?
That's my preference.
Okay,
Thank
yeah.
you.
So, Aaron, how are you doing today? I think it's super early in there.
Oh yeah, that's normal rise and shine time. No problem.
Okay. Oh wait, I think we should do a pre-introduction as why the background of Aaron is similar as Qing.
I was
because
laughing
they are
about
a family.
Yeah.
In case anybody wonder, yeah, Dr. Melvin is the husband of our beloved Qinjie. So I guess the next guest would be Navier, huh? So collect the whole family.
Yeah.
He's getting ready.
Okay, he's very talented. So I think we should start with maybe Aaron. You actually know a lot about the Chinese fans, as like you have been living with Qing for so many years. I guess maybe you can have a slight introduction of what you have done that may interest our audience.
Yeah, sure. I certainly can relate to a lot of topics that Qin tells me that Chinese fans are interested in, which is a foreigner interested in Formula One racing. So sure, it's a Western sport, but it's very European, and it's a long way for an American. So especially back at, I'm 45 years old, so it's when I was getting interested, it was right in the formation of BAR Honda. Just to give you some context, so the beginning of the Brackley team, and
That was
we had
2006?
1999.
Whoa, okay.
All the way back.
So,
Okay.
Yeah, I think I think I might be wrong. It might have even been 98. I don't quite remember. The zipper car, I think, was 99, but that was the day of IndyCar with Reynard. And that's kind of how I got my start. In any case, Formula One's a very European sport and not accessible to Americans. Maybe
Even
more
you
so.
feel like a foreigner for them?
I was. I think there's only 2 Americans in Haas before I hired a couple more in terms of Haas technical team. When I worked in Brackley, there was Otmar Safnar was an American, but really very few, maybe a couple of Americans at any of the teams I worked in. So from that aspect, I can relate to some of the topics of what the Chinese fan might be interested in. And then certainly a lot of the topics I believe that your fans are interested in are universal, that all fans have, whether European or my family even with... and the point is, maybe we'll touch on, depending on what you want to talk about, is no matter how close you are to the sport, it can be very hard to uncover the truth. And, there's a lot of reasons for anything that happens. And it's fun to talk about and to think about, but it's very hard to be precise on why McLaren is so fast or whoever is so slow.
Not to name any names, right?
Yeah,
we can say the green cars, they're slow, but yeah.
Well, yeah, I mean, Sauber and Williams are an interesting story, right? They declined very badly due to lack of investment. So that is pretty simple.
Yeah.
But then how do you recover and what's going to happen? So yeah, we can get into that. But I think it's great how enthusiastic the Chinese audience is. So hopefully I can make it more fun for them.
Why don't we start it with how did you get interested in Formula One as a foreigner just like us?
Yeah.
And how did you get into this business?
Interested, like many of the fans, came across it on television watching with my father. So that was waking up at 5 a.m. To see Senna drive, and then eventually Schumacher. So I was a competitive ski racer my whole childhood. I love competition and very technically minded. So I like both. I love sports, not particularly good at them, but totally devoted to them in my childhood, and I love competition, and then the technical aspect appeals to me. So I was like a lot of children, love cars, and I appreciate design, but it was always about the performance of a car rather than admiring the looks. You combine that with my interest in competition from ski racing, saw IndyCar come to the circuit, which is 20 minutes from our house in Portland every year. Back then, all you needed to do was write a letter, physical letter, to all of the IndyCar engineers. And they were incredibly welcoming and gracious and gave me advice and said, go get some real experience and get to work. So from that time on, I just worked, I volunteered preparing race cars at the amateur level in Oregon. And every summer in between college, I went to Princeton out in the East Coast, so all the way across the country. And I just was very determined to find a job in racing, which started with Reynard's wind tunnel in Indianapolis, which took a phone call every day for 2 months to get the chief designer of that facility on the phone. So every single day, at least 1 or 2 phone calls per day, and force him to take my call. And then the second summer, I got an internship with the Indy Lights race team, and I was polishing wheels. And the head engineer there at the end of the summer said, I never once looked up and saw you not working. So, the enthusiasm and hard work is what brought further opportunities. So it's very lucky, but you create your own ways in, even if it's at the very, very base level. And that's something interesting. I don't know enough about Chinese motorsport environment yet. What exists at the grassroots level? Yeah.
That's what I actually just wanted to mention. Nobody in China has a circuit 20 minutes away, and you have a team that you can just take an internship at during like your summertime or something. That's something actually we think we have a lot of people who also share the similar level of enthusiasm. But maybe it's we admire that you can have that opportunity. But that's good. With Chester.
Yeah, definitely. Like a lot of people here are all petrol heads. They love motorsport. They love racing. But sometimes if they want to get into a motorsport team or like do anything, it's kind of a great leap and hard to find the opportunities. And there's no like a path that everyone agreed on, like how to get in. And like Yifei and also Zhou Guanyu, they like went to the European side of racing to get there
as a driver.
As a driver and as an engineer.
And also, if you want to work in the Formula level team, the highest level in China is Formula 4. So still quite far away.
But that's my point is what I started at is few levels below Formula 4. So it is certainly tough without a known activity and who do you call and so on. But there must be circuits and activity in China. So that's what I'd love to learn about maybe another time. But
maybe Chester, you should hire some mechanics for your karting from our audience. That could be a grassroots start.
Yeah, I mean karting. The karting scene, like in Beijing, is actually growing and throughout China. I think that's one of the bright spots. But like what we lack nowadays is just something above karting and maybe above Formula 4. That's like something's lacking. We have CTCC, which is kind of like BTCC. It's highly competitive. A lot of manufacturers are in it. And that's about it. The GT racing series, China GT, was dead like for a couple of years. It came back this year. But overall, the GT racing and also anything that's beyond Formula 4 and TCR is actually a bit lacking.
Yeah, after hearing what you said, I agree with Aaron on this case. Is actually we have a lot of opportunity just by considering taking an internship in the racing team, Formula 4 or GT3. It is good enough. But it's just people in China in general does not have this sense that I should join. I should like actively seeking for an opportunity to have an initial exposure to the motorsport world. That's lesson 1 we learned today.
Okay.
Well,
exactly.
It really is true. Like actually, it's relatively rare among American students as well. So now the common in Europe and America is just to do Formula student in the university, which is so prevalent. There's every university, mechanical or aerospace engineering university have these programs. That's not enough. It's good to get some practical experience in real world.
Yeah.
Yeah. So speaking of Aaron, your journey. So after Indy Lights, how did you become an engineer at Pratt Miller, and also how did that experience get you to Formula One?
So that first meeting with IndyCar engineers in the late '90s, and I have all the letters still in my personal files.
Wow.
Some very nice, and I even met with Robbie Gordon, a couple of drivers. The statement from those engineers was aerodynamics is the most powerful factor in making an Indy car fast, and certainly that applied to Formula One as well. So that's why I went into aerodynamics, was simply it's the most important factor. And as it turns out, I love fluid mechanics and aerodynamics, so that's rather convenient. But the motivation was entirely to be the best Formula One designer possible. And that's, again, the only reason I went to Princeton and stayed there for a PhD in computational aerodynamics is I could see how complicated designing these cars would be. And I learned a little bit about the process from my internship in Reynard. In the summers, I designed one of the first ever NASCAR wind tunnel models, and I participated in, at a very low level, just an assistant in the design of IndyCar wind tunnel programs, and saw the process and saw how deficient it was, or at least the opportunity to do better. And I said to myself, okay, I need to do a PhD to become a better applied aerodynamicist. And so that's why I spent 10 years in Princeton. Then I was very well trained, very lucky to get a job. So I applied to all of the teams and rejected by most of them. I got interviews.
Wait. So just want to clarify. You went to get a PhD because you specifically want to join an F1 team. That's
the only point. So my life in college was very easy because what I wanted to do was simple. In America, you don't have to pick your vocation or major even very early. You go to Princeton to learn, and you can study philosophy or English or whatever. And for me is very clear. I did 2 degrees. I did mechanical engineering and aerospace engineering. All of my projects, every single independent project, was focused on how do I apply my knowledge to a Formula One car, because foundation of my education was extremely theoretical, which I think is what made my career. Meaning, it's not about what you learn and whether you know what resin system works for toughness in composites. You learn about the theory and how to think and the framework. Then I was able to apply that to how it might work on a Formula One car by building strain gauged composite beams that couple bending and torsion. And you think about, this is what I might do one day in the aeroelasticity of a F1 wing. I had a few interviews. I applied to 10 teams. Maybe back then there were 12 teams. And I think I only got 2 interviews. And I ended up getting a job offer from Honda F1 team. So I joined them in 2007.
Actually, I have a guess. I don't know whether you agree. I think back to 2006 or 7, PhD degree from Princeton may be too overqualified for Formula One. They were probably scared by you.
I don't think that's true, but it's true. I was a little bit disappointed on my first day of work because Princeton was so brutal from intellectual honesty point of view. You are ripped apart to get to the truth. And I could see right away in a professional environment, there's maybe because there's so much emotion invested, or I don't know, the culture in almost every working environment is not so focused on radical honesty or robustness. So I that was something I had to learn right away. Is in Princeton I was extremely far from from the most talented or the smartest. There are true geniuses, numerous geniuses that you might encounter every day. Pretty special place. And in a Formula One team, there's a lot of great engineers and smart people, but it's nothing like the true intellect of a top university.
Yeah, we had another friend who worked at Rebel Powertrains on the 2026 regulation, and he said like basically the same thing. After joining in, he was somehow a little bit disappointed, since like a lot of people are not that interested in like maybe to try to find out like how this thing work, like what's the underlying theory and the fundamental part of it. They only care if it works on track, and if it has performance, then it's fine. Like, let's move on to the next step, because development is like on the clock.
On the other hand, that's what's fun. That's engineering, right? Because we're not scientists. We are competitors with an engineering task, and that's the distinction, right? The foundation of sustained success in my group in aerodynamics was trying to get to the truth and totally interested in the science. So that's the key. But where do you become pragmatic and move on and focus? One of the things we try to understand in job interviews, and I know we weren't unique in my group, it's important for any team to understand a scientist, some PhD coming to the team, are they going to be satisfied moving on? Or do they need to know every last detail and work for 20 years on one problem? And there's no right or wrong, it's just different. And we try to uncover people's preferences. And indeed, one of the reasons I was interested in PhDs when we were interviewing people was to figure out their toughness, and meaning their real intellectual curiosity, and to go through the basics, meaning the physical phenomena, and that's how you uncover performance reliably. So it is a tricky balance.
Okay.
So we have I think the audience knows something about what is happening in Formula One teams today. We see all this drama news coming from teams. But when you went back to 2007, when you joined Honda, what's like the major difference between an F1 team in the past and compared with now?
More than we have time for, but the key essence is the scale was larger. It was a large. I don't know the facts of the budget, but it was a almost effectively unlimited budget back then. We weren't limited by the budget. We had 198 people in our aerodynamics department
Wow.
I think that was a number from 2008, but 2007 we were about the same size. And as an industry, we did a much worse job. It was just, it's nice to, one of the things I'm proud about or have enjoyed seeing is how much better we have gotten, the industry, at doing the job through the years. So as a thought experiment, a lot of fans, we always talk about switching drivers around and this and that. What if we just gave the teams the 2008 regulations again? What would the cars look like?
Yeah. That's interesting.
Yeah, we had
question.
these groove tires that were terrible. There were a lot of things. It's an impossible thing, but just aerodynamically, how much better of a job would we do? Because those cars were very complicated with, there was no radius rule on the bodywork, so we could put devices anywhere we wanted.
Basically anywhere, yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it would be very fun to return to them. And that's one of the things we think about is, 2022 with the new regulations in Haas, we understood the architecture that the regulations demanded. And so we had a pretty successful car. We came out relatively competitive, and we addressed bouncing relatively quickly because we kind of knew what was coming. But also we got a lot of the basic architecture correct, what has now proven correct years later. And that's one of the things you think about. So, I often think about what would we have done back in 2008 if we had those rules now.
Maybe you can do an individual project applying that interesting stuff into that powerful engine card.
Yeah.
But basically, the teams back then were much more cut and try process. So less understanding of the flow physics and much more turning the handle of of iterative design refinements. And now we have a much stronger integration of vehicle dynamics and aerodynamics. So what car do you want to design? Answering that question, we're much better at now.
Yeah. Especially with the budget and also the ATR aero testing restrictions in hand. So basically teams cannot afford to just waste all the testing hours onto maybe something that doesn't have.
So would you say now is more scientist compared with back then was more like engineered?
That's a way of putting it. And it's not as though we were foolish back then, but we were approaching 500 wind tunnel runs per week. So it's a factor of 10 more.
So resources.
So and even back then, one of the projects that we were working on that I was really determined to do was not waste information. And we knew we were throwing away a tremendous amount of knowledge per wind tunnel run, but the pace is relentless. How do you extract more information and retain that information when you're working at that rate? And the teams certainly have gotten much, much better at that. There's a long way to go, actually, but they're much better now than way back then.
Okay, so a little bit background information for our audience. So you joined Honda in 2007, right? And stayed at Brackley through Brawn GP and through Mercedes years, and then took a break? Or you thought
I don't call it a break,
okay.
But yeah, I went to IndyCar.
Yeah, okay.
And more generally than IndyCar, General Motors hired me to work at Pratt & Miller Engineering, which is a 200-person engineering firm who at that time, for a long time, was responsible for all of or almost all of GM Racing's activity. So we're like a specialist arm. They were technically independent from a business perspective, but they were functionally like a racing arm of GM, and they still do the Corvette racing design and manufacture. So a lot of skilled technicians and mechanics with manual fabrication methods. And I set up an aerodynamics capability at that company, and the primary goal was to design the aero package for IndyCar competition, which had been a standard body kit from Dallara, and the manufacturers were being allowed to design bodywork. So that was a big project. Again, no budget constraint, no knowledge of the competition, but we could only sell the bodywork for a certain price. And at GM, we weren't going to subsidize the material. So I had cost-constrained engineering for the first time. So I had learned an awful lot in Formula One, nothing about budget control. And then I came to GM and Pratt & Miller and was responsible not just for the aerodynamic design, but for the composite design and safety and production, where we have to make enough I think we had 13 cars. And so we had to make 40 sets of this bodywork. In Formula One, you make 3 sets to go to a race, right? Yeah. That's the minimum generally acceptable. So that was a tremendously satisfying project because I had to prove I knew what I was doing at a pretty young age. And we got to do all aspects of that project. And fortunately, we were pretty successful, and we got to do the Corvette racing aerodynamic design and the Cadillac GT3 car and some special projects for the road cars as well. So we worked a little bit with the studio and the road car, quite a number of projects actually. So when I left in 2016 to go back to Formula One, I think we had 9 active individual projects, one of which would have been the IndyCar. So that was really fun, building a diverse group and working still with technical thoroughness and precision, but at very constrained cost. We dominated Honda, which we were proud of, but we were also proud that we were pretty sure that the budget was much, much smaller. So it wasn't just that we did a better job, we did it at a much cheaper price.
Definitely a good job. It's 2015 and 2016's Drivers and Manufacturers Championship in IndyCar, and also the C7R GTLM, which was the Corvette GT car, also won Daytona, Sebring, Le Mans twice, and also 2016 Drivers Manufacturers Championship. So right after Brawn GP, then you dominated
that's
Honda.
actually what we want to go back a little bit first. Is I think for the audience, the most interesting part from your first episode of the Formula One would be how did Honda went bankrupt, and how did it become a Brawn GP that started like the most legendary story in Formula One. You went through all these stories. And anything like we don't know about this yet that you can share with us?
Some of the behind the scene.
And yes, the any individual's version will be a partial version. So an aspect that shows the power of an individual is where did this idea come from for the Brawn GP project, meaning not the company, but the car project? Well, Loïc Bigois was the head of aerodynamics at Williams, which back then was a pretty serious team, you know, and I'm not implying anything different now. I'm just saying.
Well, serious is a really interesting word I've never heard before, but I like it.
Why do I say that word? Because they had an excellent wind tunnel. So the Brackley wind tunnel, which we call Wind Tunnel 2, because it was the second tunnel, is almost identical to the Williams one, or at least the kind of the key parts, steel conveyor belt, and kind of the most of the key parts are very similar. So Williams was fairly early to get into this modern generation of wind tunnels, and in that time, that context, it was excellent. But Loïc could see that the rest of the supporting infrastructure, investment, context around the team wasn't enough to be successful. And he moved to Honda, displaced good personal friend of mine. And so I didn't like this person. And now he's a great friend. Loïc was extremely important in influencing the 2009 car project. So there are many other people as well, but he set up the idea of getting to work early. Sounds so simple, but that's very difficult to do when you have the demands of a corporate board saying, why is our 2007's car so awful? And remember, the 2007 Honda was a big disappointment. 2006, the car was pretty good. I think that was a race win. 2007, near the back, really poor. And the 2008 car is one of the cars I'm most proud of in all of my career. It was an average car. I don't even know where we got in the championship, but we started, we completely reworked the way the company did aerodynamics. We brought in a lot more consistency and precision in terms of what car are we going to build, meaning integrated with vehicle dynamics and something that the driver can use effectively and we can develop. And we put on 20% in 20 weeks. I think we might have fallen just shy. We were 18% when we launched the car.
This 20% is in terms of what?
Performance improvement compared to the previous car.
Okay. Yeah, that is quite a lot.
That's double what you might normally get. So that was a tremendously successful project. Perhaps not supported by a very powerful engine. So in parallel to that, we started on Brawn GP's car, the 2009 car, which was supposed to be a Honda, very early. And Loïc organized a group working in Japan, an independent group working at a less good, smaller wind tunnel very early. And some of us in the main team working in so-called Wind Tunnel 1, the smaller, older wind tunnel, and at times in Wind Tunnel 2. the big main wind tunnel. So that takes the vision and confidence of a leader to design the program that's going to succeed. And then, of course, you need cohesion and execution by all the workers. I was one of the workers, dedicated and giving good ideas, and like many others. So what's the key ingredient? It's all these things, but that's the foundation of the 2009 car was the early start with good focus. Other people started early too, but we're very thorough in reading the regulations and thinking about what car we wanted to end up with, not what gave a good performance in the short term.
Yeah, there's different kind of starting early. There's like Honda's starting early, getting a Brawn GP, a championship winning car, and there's also BMW Sauber starting 2007 and 2008, giving up current year's potential hopes, and turns out like next year didn't achieve anything. Well, there's like loads of things to talk about, obviously, about Brawn GP, and I think one of the most common talked about myth is, Brawn GP won the 2009 championship because of the W diffuser. But I'm sure like you have a lot to say about that, right?
Yeah. I was part of the group that worked on the diffuser. So if anybody's proud of it, I am. I'm a good friend of Minagawa, who invented it. And I've stayed in his house in Japan. I went and visited him afterwards. So he deserves a tremendous amount of credit for coming up with the idea. When his idea came over to us, it was a performance loss. And a couple of people in my group didn't want to adopt the architecture, which would have been a mistake because it was tremendously powerful. But just the point is, it wasn't an aha moment. I remember exactly where I was sitting. So on the other hand, I said, oh, wow, this is a very big deal. But maybe that wasn't so widely shared as people say now. But why were we good? Because Toyota thought of it early. Williams thought of it early. They developed their cars around it. We even tried to get rid of it. All those stories you've heard from Ross Brawn about offering to ban it, we were exceedingly upset at him because we felt we had a good advantage with it. But he did indeed offer to let it go because we knew we would have a good car regardless. Why is that? Because we integrated the aerodynamics from nose to tail. Our front wing was by far more developed than anybody else's front wing. It was exceptionally more well thought out, and especially the upper devices, if the main wing is here, those upper ones there were a new mechanism and very powerful, much better than the other teams at the beginning. And especially we figured out at the back of the car the flow control with little devices hanging off of the what we called the cake tins, or effectively off of the inboard face of the wheel.
So are those the quadruplanes that's
right.
People talk about?
What Italians or Ferrari call quadruplane, four-plane.
Okay.
I think the first name I called them were bin deflectors, because this is the cake tin or bin.
Okay.
And the fundamental point is it was a wing that we put very close to the ground that created suction at the edge. So it extended the span of the diffuser, changed the lateral boundary condition, just made the edge flow much, much better. So it controlled the flow through the ride height. It allowed us to make the main diffuser work much harder.
Okay.
And that's something that was, again, put it on and it was powerful right away. And then I just developed it like crazy, and it was better and better and better. And my description of how it does, I would not have given the first day I developed it, drew it, the first month. No, I didn't understand it that well at all. So it's not like I knew all of this. So there was a mixture of trying something, and a lot of these ideas, you don't know exactly how they're going to work. You have to explore and trying. And certainly I would do a better job now as an engineer. I'm a better engineer than I was a couple of years into my career. But I'm extremely proud of that contribution, because that mechanism to improve and extend the diffuser is, has proven so powerful that it's built into the regulations today. So
Does it
that's
help with the rear wheel tire score as well? So with
yeah,
the diffuser.
that's exactly one of the most damaging aspects of the aerodynamics of the car are these pesky tires, and they're always sending some mess of flow where you don't want it.
Yeah, into the
So,
perfect diffuser area.
yeah, why was our diffuser so good? Well, we figured out if you turn it laterally, the outwash of the diffuser into the wake of the tire. So the other thing you should look at for those fans who are interested is look at the launch of our car. We had a tremendously powerful sideways turning flow out of the back of the diffuser, and that was enabled because we had the bin deflector or quadruplane. And
I'm seeing
even
it right now.
good.
It is,
Toyota
yeah.
and Williams had a double diffuser, and they didn't have anything like that. And despite Red Bull or Newey's claim that they had it, their launch car, they didn't have that until they copied us in race 3. So that was a weird one to me. Why they even their memory is not correct. You know, they thought, oh, we had that. No. So that car was extremely impressive in its architecture when their suspension and bodywork was superior. But we had everything else better. Front wing, diffuser, especially the rear wheel furniture, as sometimes people call it, the bin deflector.
Right. So the success of the legendary Brawn GP was not only the double diffuser, but like the aerodynamics from the startup, the whole package, the team structure, and also like from the front wing to how it connects, how it works together, including the double diffuser. It's just one
That's right.
piece.
Exactly correct. We would only have created those designs with the organizational structure that Loic put in place. He didn't design a single part on the car, but without him and his program design, we would not have succeeded. And without people like me and my colleagues interpreting each bit of work every 10 minutes very well, we wouldn't have been as successful. So it's at all levels that you need to be really coordinated.
Right.
Yeah, that sounds like a more convincing explanation than what Keanu Reeves said in the program. Yeah.
That's the story I'd like to get across to the fans, which is because I was involved behind the scenes a little bit with that production. We were just disappointed that it's always the story of the track. You know, the Drive to Survive was great fun. Keanu Reeves I think they did a great job with that documentary. And the track team is extremely important. The dynamics and how you orient the factory is one of the things I've been able to extend from Formula One into other industries as my professional life evolves, and I try and help other organizations and industries. This is one of the key things that Formula One allows us to experiment and where I've been helpful with a wide number of industries.
Okay, so from like your first episode in Formula One to the second episode, like your role also changed from the guy who actually do the design to the chief aero. From what we heard, if you become a chief aero, you actually design less. You make the people to work on the job, and you become like the main shareholder for the whole package. So could you explain what kind of role difference between these two, episode of your career?
It all depends on which team. So there isn't a good consistency between job title and function between teams. And one of my Formula employees has recently switched from a small team of Haas to a big team, and it's amazing. His mind was blown of the resource they have, and so it's very variable. In the big team, it's the normal. The specialization and the distribution of workload is better. It gives you more time to think. In Haas, we were tiny. We had to do a lot. So just as I created a group from scratch in Michigan, the person who hired me, Ben Agathangelo, a really successful long-time Formula One aerodynamics engineer, really did a great job setting up the team. All aspects of the technical team, including the aerodynamics department. So he hired me as principal aerodynamicist, which in other teams would be called chief. I was responsible for the design of the car. For every other team, that's the only job of that person. in Haas, I was also responsible for the CFD group and the hiring and the running of the group. So, and I was comfortable with that because of my previous 7 years in Michigan doing that plus business development. So to me, it was a step down in overall responsibilities. I spent a lot of time designing the car, but also helping the CFD group improve our method. So you would like to separate development of tools from development of the car in terms of an individual's responsibility. In Haas, we didn't have that luxury, so I did that. And I hired a lot of young people because even though it's a very desirable job, near the back of the grid in Italy is pretty tough to hire experienced people. As if they have a family, will they really want to move to Italy maybe they'll move to Italy for Ferrari. Even that's not so easy. Much harder for Haas. So again, one of the things I'm so proud about is the group we built is an excellent group at Haas, and it carried on with momentum after I left. And I hired these very talented individuals, but they needed a lot of training. So I probably ended up drawing a much larger fraction of the car, me using the CAD program, communicating shapes to people. Like 2018 car, I drew a substantial fraction. It wasn't my explicit aspiration or target. So even if I was only responsible, it was a fast car. And in 2019, I did the same, and it was less fast car. So it's not. I shouldn't just pick the winners. That one overheated its tires in a straight line, right? So it's it's tough to talk. That's again another discussion. But I drew a lot of the car, and I didn't want to. I wanted to be responsible for everything we sent to the wind tunnel and to the track, but the chief designer, chief aerodynamicist should not be aspiring to designing individual parts. I did it because I had to make a competitive car, and it's important to teach people and show them refinement and detail, and getting a lot of the problems that we fix and refine are pretty simple, pretty obvious, but can you do it in 1 or 2 tries and not 3 or 4 tries so you can move on to the next thing? And another performance differentiator between teams is what problems you choose to work on. The ideas that one team or another send to the track, almost every other team will have thought about. But will they have thought about it in the right context and tried it in the right way and developed it properly? So I referred to 2022 new regulations. When we saw what the other teams were doing, we were very confident because we had thought about those ideas carefully enough to have moved past them. And that's where, rightly or wrongly, maybe there was some arrogance there, but basically we knew what the others were thinking. And that's what one of the things I tried to do at Haas that was a bit unusual was try very hard to understand what the other teams were doing. I don't care about copying and trying their shape. Actually, probably I'd prefer not to, but I would very much like to put myself in their mind and think like they're thinking, and understand, is that productive or not? What road does that take you down? And especially we did that with Ferrari because we were buying the gearbox and the engine and the uprights from them.
Yeah, the whole rear part. Yeah.
Yeah, and the front suspension. So there's a tremendous amount, and it changed through the years how much we could buy. So if you get over your ego of doing it myself, and you accept that Ferrari have a extremely good performance, and we need to understand why they've done what they're doing, and we're not going to go another direction until we can till we can be faster.
Exactly. Speaking of performance per dollar, I think the 2018 Haas season is definitely one of the highlights where the small team punched much above its weight. So can you explain what's so special about the VF18 and some of the journeys that year?
I came in August of 2016, and so the 2017 architecture was kind of in place. And 2017, again, was not a bad car, but the big revolution in the industry all the teams from 17 to 18 were the barge boards, the middle of the car. And that went from being a relatively simplistic device and understanding to something that ended up in 2021 as amazingly sophisticated and intricate. And we got on our 2017 design was poor, executed by an extremely good group of aerodynamicists on our car. So it's not like the people working on it were not intelligent, but we weren't sophisticated. So 17, we were improving our way of working, learning each other, teaching. We did an okay job. And 2018, everything had gelled much better. And so a lot of it was the group, and specifically why the car actually went fast around corners was the front wing was solid, was very good, and the middle of the car was extremely good. And that put us on the road that 18, 19, 20, our barge board kept us competitive, the middle of the car. So we probably had reasonable designs elsewhere. But yeah, that was kind of the foundation of our success, I think.
Okay.
Things maybe you can give us an insight of drivers.
Oh, yeah.
Pelot just won at Indianapolis, and I remember you were saying he was amazing.
He is.
Yeah. So after working both in Formula One, also the US side, IndyCar, how do you rate drivers at the IndyCar right now? Below, Herta, or Award?
Adding on that is because we're expecting Joe to have a seat next year. So his main competitor, we're guessing, would be one of the IndyCar drivers, Paulo, and especially Herta. So as a professional, in the IndyCar.
If I were in a position to influence driver choice, of course, I would inform myself a lot better than consider me a fan. This is a fan's perspective. But yeah, driver selection program, I've long been interested in being involved in, and I've spoken to some of the top engineers in Mercedes and other teams about how they did it back then. But in IndyCar, there aren't a set of drivers. There's one. That's Palou is exceptional.
Verstappen of IndyCar.
Well, he's currently doing Verstappen in the whole grid right now.
Yeah, it's nice to see because he didn't have dominant qualifying speed in previous years, and this year it looks like he may. Yesterday, he lost a first corner and followed for about 2/3 of the race and had a advantage on strategy with the tire sequencing. He didn't wait. He took advantage and passed on track and won by a mile. So IndyCar has been frustrating through the years with the influence of safety car, yellow flags, ruining good driving and speed. And we've been lucky this year. Hasn't really happened. So in the first race, Palou got a little bit lucky because Dixon was without proper team radio and calling his own strategy. So just to comment on how intelligent Scott Dixon is. Great driver, 6 championships, bit older, so maybe he's I think he's 1 year younger than me. He probably isn't quite the same speed he used to be, but this is one of the greatest drivers we've seen. And Palou is so much ahead. So that's a good reference. The quality of a lot of the IndyCar drivers seems to be managing the tire as it comes in, the in laps and the out laps in simple terms, and understanding the tire and how to manipulate it. The same challenges in Formula One, how all of these drivers are so impressive, feeling the tire so quickly, and how Hamilton and Schumacher are better than the others. There's a lot in this. It's not that Michael was so much faster than Barrichello in Barrichello's best. It's that Michael is always at his best, and the teammate is only at his best one day a year. And, that's only a small exaggeration. So, yeah, I think people should appreciate, try and watch some IndyCar, see how well Palou develops his pace at the right moment. And he's just incredibly fast. And clean driving. I like Piastri because he's extremely precise in placement of the car, always tough racer. This year's satisfying because he now brought the speed to go with that. And maybe it's a bit exaggerated, but the Piastri versus Norris ability to pass Verstappen is kind of telling, right? And we haven't seen a lot of Paolo battling because he's so fast, but he's similarly very good, very precise. So I always found the best drivers were cleanest in, Verstappen is very intentional. He doesn't make mistake where he puts his car. So I shouldn't use the word clean with the way he drives, but he is precise. And you see Montoya was very good at battling with Schumacher because they were both so precise, and that's the drivers I appreciate and I like. So yeah,
Okay.
try and appreciate Paolo. He's really good.
Yeah. So in conclusion, you think Paolo is above everybody else. So
Yeah.
Herta, what do you think of him?
I don't know anything, no
As a
insider
fan,
information
as a fan,
here.
as a fan,
but
yeah.
he's
From now
impressive
on, everything is
because,
just being a fan.
yeah, but I'll give it if I have it, but I just don't know. He was a wasted talent. Didn't work hard, super fast, and you think, oh, what a waste. And now it appears he's a hard worker, stays calm. So I would love to see him move teams to understand how he would do outside of Andretti, where he's been a long time. His dad, I don't think is an undue influence. I don't think it's about his dad. I think it's just be nice to see Herta at a different team. So I don't have a sense that Herta would be great in F1. Maybe I'm wrong. I think be fun to see.
Okay, so let's talk about like realistic chances. Herta now has 31 super license points, and Allward technically can apply for super license, and Pelot, since he won IndyCar 3 times, he already has. So Allward and Pelot has technically a shot at Formula One, and also Allward is a McLaren reserve driver, tested 3 times before, and the news just broke 3 days ago. He's going to test drive the FP1 session in the Mexico Grand Prix. So seems like Award has a lot of used a lot of resource at McLaren. So do you think maybe
McLaren no way. So I guess we're talking about Cadillac, and I think it's fairly reasonable for them to say they should hire a experienced person. I like the idea of Joe compared Perez, because the problem with a veteran that thinks they should be high up the grid, and let's presume Cadillac will not be, where does the productivity against frustration and stubbornness, and that's down to the individual, and you'd have to know them better to know how it's going to play out. But just think about what a disaster our 2022 season would have been if we didn't have Kevin in instead of the amateur driver. So,
yeah, we're talking about like how we rate drivers, but can you give us an insight like how an F1 team rate drivers internally? Do they have like a spreadsheet or some formula?
Yeah, does
some model?
the presentation works like what the George did?
Yeah.
The truth is, I don't know, because I don't think it's that well publicized.
Okay.
There is a now fairly publicized driver coach. I describe him as a savant. Rob Wilson is an ex-driver, and he's this old guy who drives sedans around an airport sort of test field. And he can evaluate the skill of a driver in about 1 lap. And he's just a genius, a true driving genius. And he has played a role in driver choice and evaluation for a number of teams. And he's trained a great number of IndyCar and F1 and Rally. And the professional motorsports world is tremendously benefited and influenced by this person. To me, that was an eye-opener. When I met him, I was lucky. I made friends. I spent some time at the track taking designs around in the mid-2000s, and in the Brackley team. And those races, I love driving myself and train. And the race engineers there who use him as a young driver evaluation in Brackley back in that time, hopefully they still do, introduced me to him. So I became good friends with Rob. I learned something about that evaluation. I tried to get out of him, why are these drivers so much better than me? And he said, oh, they're not. It's just a bit of training. And because in the road car, I can do the same time as Rob or the drivers around the track. But I can't do it every single lap first try. I can do it most of the time. And that is maybe an example of the best drivers can get into any car, understand the tire at the limit right away all the time. So the true system for evaluating drivers, I don't know. I suspect, I hope I'm wrong, but I suspect it's as poor as it is in other sports, which is, I have one of my college friends is the general manager of the Minnesota Vikings. How does he select the players? And the teams are famously terrible at it, right? Okay. Tom Brady, last pick in the draft, and I think soccer is pretty similar. So yeah. I think Formula One teams are probably equally difficult.
Marco,
poor. Yeah.
Buriatori.
So just look at the last cup of performance and
just
say,
try.
"Oh, good enough." he scored points in a Williams in Monza. Must be good, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Oh yeah, okay. Just to digress, Xin actually sent a chat. So to remind you to remember to drink some water.
That's too sweet.
Yeah.
My blood sugar is spiking now.
Yeah.
Do as you're told.
Yeah.
Okay.
It is.
Wow.
So lovely. Yeah. Okay. Back to the maybe driver selection. We've seen like how Dr. Helmut Marko do the selection process, and also the banishing them to the second team process.
I totally disagree with his approach. My personal preference is that brutal environment. I love it. That's a failure of a concept. People don't do their best work when they're treated that way. You treat them like that, and they're going to overcome maybe, but they're not going to succeed. Look at Albon. What a joke how they missed. Wouldn't they give to have Albon in that seat? That's a flawed idea how to run an organization. Treat people well. They need to perform. You expect excellence, and you have consequences. You make them comfortable.
Yeah.
You don't tell them they're going to fail beforehand. That's wrong.
It does seem like a really toxic environment to be working in.
Speaking of toxic environment, so as a fan of Formula One, I have a very tough question for you. If you get to run the Ferrari team, what can we do to make it back to the champion? It's been 20 years.
You wait another 20 years. Good luck.
Okay. So
just look at history. Why were Michael, Ross, and John Todt so successful?
Not Italian.
Well, I left out the key Italian.
Okay.
Luca de Montezemolo was focused on winning. He allowed John Todt to insulate the team from the pressure. I think most people could not relate to the pressure that the Italians feel. It's a national pride and responsibility to succeed. I was a bit shocked. Just some lowly junior aerodynamicist in Honda. I walk into a pub in England, and somebody starts commenting on my professional work. And it's like, whoa. Think of that in Italy, and it's times 100.
Yeah.
We were stopped by the police in the car, and instead of giving a ticket, he sees the Ferrari badge and says, "Oh, it's an honor to be speaking to you. Please have a pleasant day, and I'd like you to get to work quickly and safely."
Wow.
And that's just the way it is there. So, with that context, there is not a calmness and support. The idea of no blame culture is completely laughable in Italy. It's the exact opposite. There's not the
you
mutual...
said comfortable environment. That's something they don't have at all.
No. So there's an extraordinary resource there, and great passion and intelligence and effort, but the cohesion of the top management down to middle management. And there I include well below technical director. You need everybody on board thoroughly, fundamentally, and people to get on board if you bring them with them. It's not a command and control that will work. It has to be people believing in and working together. So too much allowance for personal gain and manipulation. So how to fix it? It's a big job, but it starts with Vigna needs to set the tone. Then team principal. I think it's got to cascade down from the top and let the people adjust and adapt to the new way. And it's going to take a generation of workers.
Generation.
Yes.
Well, there's already been like 2 generations, so couldn't hurt
but
for another.
But not of stability and trust and support. So they may get close, and there's a lot that's great about them, but I don't see an easy path to the top echelon. The other way for them to win is the other teams to mess up.
Okay.
Yeah.
I guess they need a multiple teams
Yeah.
to
Now,
mess up
I'm
now.
talking about beating people at the top of their game, but then of course you see strife in Red Bull. Mercedes hasn't recovered as well as they should. So the competition isn't a constant, is what I'm saying. So, I root for Ferrari. I want them to do well because we had so many great years there. But organizationally, you got to support each other, and I don't see them doing that.
Okay, so in conclusion, you don't see any hope yet, but you're hoping for something to happen.
There's no rational hope, but there's irrational hope.
Yeah. Well, they did come close to winning the constructor championship last year, and by the way, how do you
And
think
Vettel driving into the tire barrier in
into 2018,
17, right?
2018 Germany.
18,
yeah,
okay.
that was a day that never happened, right? And also 2017, that was the Singapore Grand Prix, which never happened.
Yes.
Okay, no, yeah, that's enough. That's enough.
Okay,
We
But
have this tough time every week now.
So how do you think Fred Vasseur, 2 years now, do you think he's done a good job, bad job?
I don't know. Clear step up, clear improvement.
Okay.
Yeah.
That
but
to say something without saying the thing.
I just don't think, Binotto was effective. It was too many yes men, too many politic, what we just talked about. But Fred, I don't know enough about it as a relate to the, he's got a pretty good track history. It seems very sensible, seems good. I don't think the way he handled that Hamilton radio incident was convincing at all. I think it was terrible. I don't know the facts though, right? Could be very different behind the scenes.
Okay, so how about let's go into the, how do we call this, reading super chat section. So this is the part, like, we have a lot of fans, and watching the live stream will be sending in questions. So maybe we can talk about some of them. So we thank 纯纯大 noob. Okay, so basically the username translates to totally noob. Says, hello. He's asking about,
Ooh, the next podcast guest has showed up.
Yes, a brief hello. Hi, Navier.
Hey, Navier.
Hi,
See you
Navier.
later. I'll see you in a few minutes.
Okay.
Okay.
Pardon me.
Yeah, it's all right.
His boss is calling him. We got to wrap this up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. So he's asking, so F1 aero and like
Sailing.
aero design. Is there a lot of similarities between them?
Yes. So America's Cup is, tremendously interesting for me. I've been a fan my whole life. My father's from Auckland, so grew up a sailor. So I know the history very well from a fan's perspective. And one of the great challenges in America's Cup is lack of consistency, because there's only the competition it kind of used to alternate 3 to 4 years.
Yeah.
And
Every couple of years is quite a long time.
Yeah, exactly. And then moreover, like financially, it's more like you put together a campaign. It's not that you have a permanent company. And so it's a lot of start, stop. And if you all of a sudden have to build a boat to compete in 2-3 years' time, you rewind to all the steps. That's very little time. So you don't have time to develop the tools. And so the infrastructure. So it's like being the worst F1 team on the grid every single time. And one of the things that's evolved is they're getting away from that. Team New Zealand is exceptionally good at both the innovative thinking and focus on what's relevant to producing the race-winning boat. So this good integration between sailors and design team, but also now getting a lot more consistency. And Ineos was on the track to having that before it all exploded in the last few months. So my understanding is it's just arrogance and personality clashes between Ratcliffe and Ainsley. Again, I know nothing about these people, so I have no idea who's at fault or whatever. But sad, because there's a lot of engineers who were doing these jobs that who knows what they're going to do now. But technically, the topside aerodynamics is extremely similar. The subsonic, meaning low speed aerodynamics, and then some of the technical challenges of the hydrodynamics are, in detail different, but in engineering process very, very similar. So very exciting for an F1 engineer to think about and would love to work on. And perhaps I have no regrets in my professional career. I don't feel I missed anything other than think, oh, wow, I wonder if I made a different choice, if I would have given up something to work on an America's Cup. Would be fun. They're really cool boats.
Okay. We saw Allison just going there. Okay, so next question.
He did give up a lot for that job. Yeah. So I think we can wrap up with this last question before we set you free for your duty. So I think there's a lot of audience would like to know. This question might be a little bit sensitive for you, so you can choose to answer in any way you like. They want to know the difference between Gunther and Ayu as team principal.
Yeah, speaking of people you know.
Well, it's very interesting, right? Because what is the right team principal? Probably very different for Mercedes versus back of the grid. I shouldn't say back of the grid because Haas isn't back of the grid. Doesn't want to be
midfield right now. Yeah.
Yeah, but so everything is context, and what you need is a bit different. But Gunther deserves a tremendous amount of credit for building the team. Convincing Gene to go racing. We still don't really know what Gene's motivation is. I don't know him well.
So mysterious.
And that can't be simple in terms of interacting. So I disagree very strongly with a lot of the details of how Gunther managed the team, and I think it was a huge performance limitation for us. But the team wouldn't exist without his effort, and he did a lot. And then, of course, you see this evolution of team principle into character, drive to survive. But that was not, that was intentional. That was a strategy he employed, and probably, I don't know if it's successful commercially to bring in sponsors or not, but it was not a passive choice by Gunther. So what Io is different is an engineer and a more direct addressing of, there are a lot of difficult choices and trade-offs you have to make. And again, I disagreed with a lot of them as I was probably uninformed, right? It's not like I knew the full picture. So I have respect for those choices that were made, but seems like IO makes different approach, and that's where it's good. Maybe it's that. Maybe it's also the engineering structure necessarily evolves underneath when the person moves up. Who comes in and fills, and maybe they evolve and do a better job, right? So even as something as simple as that, is it improvement in the new, or is it filling in from below? So one thing I'm very proud about is, I spent so much energy building the team. Like I mentioned Ben Agathangelo before, both of us, how much can that carry on without us? And I don't try to take credit for on-track performance, but also of the aerodynamic function and the quality of the department. And that's something you need to look carefully to see and look. So hopefully that gives you a bit of a flavor, but you see big difference between Andrea Stella approach and whoever. So it's nice to see all the things that James Valls is talking about. Another friend from my past who I know well, I have a lot of respect for.
Chester is a big fan of James. He appraised everything he says.
Well, because he puts he's a serious technical engineer, but he's he knows he needed to change the image of the team. So he talks too much to the media for my taste. It's too much, but that's what the team needs. And he's intelligent, and it's not just media talk, it's real action. He knows what they need.
It's a fine balance, right? Like, how do you manage it, and how outspoken to the media you want to be?
And so it's similar to the way I did my approach with running the aerodynamics department was very unusual compared to my competitors or colleagues. I had the excuse of being an American, and we're more open than Europeans, and we just communicate plainly. So I would talk to my group weekly and explain, this is what we think we understand about the car, why we think we're fast and slow in these conditions and circumstances. Here's what we think we understand, and here's what we're going to do about it. And I would explicitly, and a lot of people do that, but I was very, very consistent about it. And I also talked about expected behavior, which is I don't control the way people behave. They set their own way of acting, but I do explain explicitly the culture we want. And very serious, very precise engineer, and that's what I expected out of people. That they knew that my absolute priority, the way we treated other colleagues, and meaning if they are helpful to their colleagues, will make progress. And this idea of empathy, if you can think about your colleagues' needs and what they need to do their job well, we will get more efficient, faster, better. And I had zero tolerance for selfishness, and that comes through. So that's a detail that propagates, and that's how I would approach being kind of a team principal.
Sounds very American style.
Yeah, it's a bit different than the European style.
Pretty direct.
No bullshit.
Yeah, I was thinking about whether to say that.
Yes, and so fine, that's my preference, but I have to blend that with the reality that I'm working with a lot of Europeans who have a very different way. And you can't just say, I'm American tough, I'm the boss, we're doing it. No. So we blend it all together, and that's what works. And that's where we got the great performance out of a Chinese person, out of a Japanese person, Italian and French, and whatever, British.
Okay.
All right.
We still got loads of questions, but I think this one would set it for today. We hope to have you maybe back in a future episode. Such a interesting and a deep dive into all the
insightful.
Yeah, everything.
Yes,
so,
as a fan.
Yeah, as a fan, I love that phrasing because obviously
from now on we should keep saying before we want to say something controversial, we say as a fan. That's my personal opinion.
No, it's like I say, I really don't mind being making my own opinion on things. It's just to me that's part of the interest is how much do we really know? Because I care about the truth, and I wish I knew. I wish I could say, as an expert, I know why Mercedes is fast. But anyway, let's enjoy these races coming up and see if Piastri
go
and
watch
Paolo.
Indy cars, guys.
Yeah, Indy
go
cars.
Watch Indy car. See how
Indy
good
500
Paolo is.
Indy 500 is exceptionally difficult circuit to set a car up well. Tremendous skill and a lot more bravery than anybody in F1.
Yeah, I mean, Roman said he wouldn't do oval racing at first, right? So yeah. With that said, I think this is it for this episode. And we haven't actually done this in English before, so please like and subscribe. Also, please try to 5 stars review on Himalaya.
This sounds so weird.
Yeah, this sounds so weird. Yeah, just
it doesn't work in English with this intro.
Yeah.
Anyways, we saved some super chats, and if we have a chance to talk to Aaron again next time, we will answer these questions. Well, no, Aaron will. Hopefully. So yeah, thank you for your time. It's the job of being a father started now.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Take care.
Right.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you. And
Thank you.
for this episode, goodbye. Bye bye.
Wow, that's
Bye-bye.
fast. Bye bye.